呢，我们要进入今天的专题演讲。今天专题演讲的主题是 AI 发展与社会影响。We will now proceed to our keynote session today, which is titled AI Development and its Societal Impact. 今天非常荣幸邀请到的是行政院经济发展委员会创新经济顾问简立峰博士来为我们主讲。Today, we are truly honored to have Dr. Developm Jian, Economic Advisor to the Executive Yuan Economic Development Commission, as our keynote speaker. 简立峰博士长期深耕资讯科技跟数位创新的领域，曾经担任 Google 台湾首任董事总经理，并且将 Google 台湾发展成为亚洲重要的研发中心。在退休之后呢，简立峰博士也持续投入台湾的新创生态系，协助多家的新创还有成熟企业来推动 AI 还有数位应用的发展。Dr. Jian has long been dedicated to the fields of information technology and digital innovation. He served as the first managing director of Google Taiwan and led its development into a major R&D center in Asia. After retiring from Google, Dr. Jian has continued to support Taiwan's startup ecosystem, helping both startups and established companies advance their AI and digital applications. 所以接下来就让大家以热情的掌声来欢迎简立峰博士。Please welcome Dr. 立峰 Jian.
Hello, everyone. Thank you and good morning. Well, speaking of the AI and the internet, in order to discuss this topic, we probably need a long time. We do believe the impact coming from AI could be even more comprehensive than the impact of the internet. I'm not a sociologist, but in terms of the AI impact, it goes beyond societal impact. Good news first. Well, we don't see too many countries in the world within a short span of 2 years. Its equity market grew by more than 5 times. National wealth increased by more than 5 times, although the distribution is not very equal. Obviously, there are ups and downs in the equity market. When the equity market plummets, can we accept this as something that's to be expected? And if the market begins to go down, we know that the market cap is 135 trillion, again, within a short span of 2 to 3 years. Before that, for almost 20 years, when our economy was very sluggish, our market cap was only 20 trillion. So, if we say equity market correction of 30% is normal, that will translate to 30 trillions. So are we ready for that? The government is ready? Our people are ready? Our investors are ready? No, of course. So this is very unique in Taiwan because, as mentioned, the 2 biggest economies in the world are the US and China. And as compared with those 2 countries, Taiwan is quite unique. But probably we are closer to Korea, because Korea in many ways is very similar to Taiwan in terms of economic development and the performance of equity market. We know that AI is now superior to human beings in terms of inference, although AI is not as good a planner as human beings. But now we are seeing the advent of AI agents. As a result, the enterprises are all about operations, and AI agents are particularly good at operations. Therefore, the impact will only grow bigger and bigger. As mentioned by Mr. Wu, back in 2010, that was the height of the computer development. everybody was looking down into their screen, either smartphone screen or computer screen. But now we are talking to computers, and computer can become our companion, and we can engage in collaboration with computer. As a matter of fact, many people would say, I don't need to put questions to you. And all I have to do is to ask AI. And this has become a daily occurrence. More and more people realize that the best advisor they could have is AI. However, we've never had a model that's trained using only Taiwan's data. But even with that kind of model, they could pass our joint entrance examination to college, and they actually scored the highest. So again, just think about this. This model hasn't been trained with any data from Taiwan, purely in English, but they could pass the sternest test. And 5 million users are willing to pay for this type of AI services. And I'm not talking about Taiwan, I'm talking about US. And Taiwan obviously is a very different environment, right? And in Taiwan, we have a lot of motorcycles on the street, so we are dealing with totally different environment. In terms of DeepSeek, they distill from the US developed models, and it became their own version. And so DeepSeek enjoyed a very special moment. And with the advent of DeepSeek, now AI agents are developing very quickly in China. There are AI agents for coding, and on May 5th, there were 10 financial AI agents developed and launched to the market. Due diligence, as well as making investment decisions, these things used to be monopolized by investment bankers. But now we can have we can even have AI agents doing the kind of work. So in terms of impact, let me begin with the positive economic impact. If you ask AI, what would be the biggest value AI can create for economic development? As a result of the Industrial Revolution, blue-collar workers suffered the most. However, this time around, white-collar workers will bear the brunt of the impact, because white-collar workers deal with knowledge. And AI is all about maximizing capital value and minimizing the value of knowledge and minimizing the expertise of individuals. Does this mean that AI companies will make a huge profit? Well, no. We actually are able to reduce the cost involved in R&D, and to develop a new drug, 10 years will be reduced to 6 months. And so this will give rise to a lot of things that are unprecedented. So young people can work during the night. The way we work will be completely upturned. And eventually, enterprise will begin to work with a lot of AI agents. Now, a lot of companies are struggling. Should they hire a new human employee, or they should tap into technology? And nowadays, a lot of companies, they have put a freeze on their hiring so that they could eventually migrate to AI. In on May 20th, they will lay off 10% of their employees. Well, for the company to make this type of announcement, because they want to make sure people who stayed will need to work with a sense of urgency. They want to put a demand on the remaining employees. All of them need to create an AI agent. And eventually, they'll probably let everybody go, and the AI agent will stay. Is that what they want? No. Well, again, this is actually the extreme case of innovation, almost like innovation on steroids. But the end result is a lot of young people cannot find a job. They want to start their own business. And basically, they will leverage AI to set up their own company according to World Economic Forum. Probably very soon, we will see 2 to 4 million companies will be set up by this type of single individuals using AI, especially in China.
What are some of the AI's social impact in terms of sovereignty? There are 2 superpowers in the world who can afford to massively invest in AI, and I just did some homework. The States invested about 200 to 300 billion US dollars, which is 10 times higher than that of China. But other countries around the world cannot really get a share in this AI race, because even if you have money, if you don't have data, you don't have platform. Platform is sometimes more important in data, because platform can really learn from the behavior of users. It has moved beyond simply being trained by massive amounts of data. It can now learn from user behavior and fine-tune itself. Now we only have 2 superpowers who can massively invest in AI. What are some of the AI? Well, countries that suffer the most in terms of the development of sovereign AI, of course, there are quite a few, but probably you've never been put into other countries' shoes. But let's think about Muslim countries. They face great pressure because one AI model comes from an agnostic country, another one from a Christian country. So Muslim or actually represent the largest religious community in the world, but they are still struggling to make a choice. So we probably never thought of this issue because we are too confined within our own territory. It's very difficult to think in other people's shoes. But when Taipower, our power utility, started to use AI to monitor power generation, but the model is not located in Taiwan, then any disruption to the system would pose severe challenge to our power system. So we really need to think about whether the day when you cannot really exercise control over the model, how about putting all the models on the edge? Let's say the Google's data centers need to be powered by a lot of water and energy. So it's actually, you cannot put everything on the peripherals. Your brain will only grow bigger and bigger. There's only, it's actually a dilemma. So it covers a lot of dimensions like government, governance, education, culture. But if token fee becomes part of your cost, if you don't own the model, then those who can access those tokens at a cheaper cost will stand to win. So it's not a simple question of equity, because without power, without utility, it will be of no use even if you have free tokens. So as we see where when YouTube started, we couldn't have enough bandwidth. So let's say if we were given free power to use the latest version of Gemini, And we can actually ask the system to do inferencing, to do research for us around the clock. We can churn out lots of papers. So the resources actually are always on hot demand, but resources comes at a cost. Those who can access those resources at a lower price or for free will stand to win. What's the implications for the government in terms of national defense? Of course, we can produce only part of our national defense, but the barrier to entry can be even higher in the age of AI, and the government cannot afford to not use AI because AI can lead to substantial productivity gains. For example, a life insurance company in Taiwan, they receive thousands of government letters asking them to freeze certain information. They need to review loads of paperwork within a short period of time. But with the use of AI, they can actually outsource the paperwork to AI and leave only one person to conduct the final check. So why wasn't that possible years before? It's because AI can digest and read non-structured documents. It can understand and digest regulations and even review your documents. So if that's possible, then most of the work being done by civil servants, which is review and approval, may actually be at stakes. So this is kind of linear relationship will be replaced by the so-called mesh relationship. And we will see the flattening of organizations, but we are not that well prepared. The same is true around the world. So now we talk about the age of sovereign AI. We see the barrier to entry getting higher and higher because countries think about how they can exercise control over their infrastructure and data. In the future, countries seek to regain control over these. So I just woke up my my AI assistant from my previous employer. So I just okay, never mind. How about some of the social impact in terms of security? How are some of the security implications? Of course, AI will create a multitude of cybersecurity risks, including inaccuracy. But how can we rebuild the social trust system and social security? Because it is difficult to distinguish real from fake information. Seeing is no longer believing, so we see the polarization of development and digital divide. Some people are digital natives, and some people are digital refugees. Of course, we can use AI to proofread AI-generated content. So we need a new institution. For example, there are always bad guys, so you need to protect yourself on your own. It's too late until you wait for new regulations to help you or when the cop to come to your rescue. So you need to rely on your own. Of course, the government wants to establish rules of law and standards, and it wants to focus on the traceability and digital identity, and the system needs to focus on the ability to trace provenance. But can we impose regulation on these? Because sometimes, can we really summon representative countries to explain how their AI works? I think it is quite difficult. And sometimes you think of a regulatory sandbox, but you need to ensure the explainability of the models underlying the sandbox, which is subject to scrutiny, and whether our data or computing power is equal for all. And the private sector should be responsible in using AI. That is whether the system they are using are explainable, and whether the skills of the agents be subject to greater scrutiny. And on the individual level, we need to change our mindset from passive reception to active verification. That is, we need to be more prudent than ever before. We need to treat everything or take everything with a grain of salt in the era of AI. And we also need to learn how we can manage AI. Now, last but not least, a few words about education. We need to increase the AI literacy of the young generation. And pedagogy should also undergo change. So I'll just skip a few points here in the interest of time. And also, there's the issue of digital equity, which is harder to attain in the era of AI. So, of course, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, the AI revolution, but we are all living under the same era, and we sit on the biggest opportunity, but we are still groping our way forward, and let's all become the conductor of AI.
谢谢简立峰博士。